fine. Hit record. All right, wonderful. So we are recording this. Everybody who registered and attended, and people who did not attend will get the recording as well. My name is Charlie Van Derven. I lead up a firm called Social Advisors. We put together custom business development plans and strategies for financial advisors, financial firms. Once a month, I like to bring on somebody that I feel is really special and is going to add value to the network that that pays attention to us. This is the third time my esteemed guest is joining us today. This is Jack Singer, Dr. Jack Singer. I met Jack, I'm guessing about 1.5 years ago, something along those lines. Yeah. Now I don't know if you'll blush or not, Jack. You've been introduced so many times. I don't know if I can do that, but honestly, Jack is one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And every time we have Jack on to present, I learn new things all the time, right? So today we're talking about developing the mindset of a champion. Now, Jack can tell you a little bit more about it, but prior to being involved in financial services, which you've been in the industry now, Jack, for what, 12, 15 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Jack worked with professional sports teams, Olympic athletes. And so a lot of the principles that he brought to those gold medalists that he helped create, he brings now to financial services. And so much of it applies, in both arenas. So like I said, Jack is on with us for the third time in a 4-part series. So a few months from now, we'll have Jack on again. And it's always a wonderful conversation. Jack, I'm going to turn it over to you. I would anticipate that everybody's going to get great nuggets out of this. So a little bit of housekeeping real quick, turn off the phone, if you can just shut down your distractions. And I would recommend you get a pen and some paper or, your notepad out on your phone or whatever it is, because Jack is going to give you a lot of great nuggets. Everything starts with mindset, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So with that, Jack, I'll be monitoring the Q&A box, and the floor is yours, my friend.
All right. Thank you so much, Charlie. And for Charlie and Social Advisors, one of the greatest organizations I've become familiar with to help with financial professionals. Thanks again for inviting me for the third time to make a presentation. And Charlie mentioned pens and notebooks. I tend to speak rapidly because I have limited time and I want to give you as much information as possible. But the good news is you don't even have to take notes, because all of this and much more is in my book, The Financial Advisor's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide, which I will make available to any of you. It's usually $37. I'll make it available for $15. You just have to send me an email at drjack@advisingtheadvisors.com and say you want the book, and I'll show you how to get it for $15. And it goes way beyond what I'm going to talk about today. So you don't have to worry about taking notes or missing anything. However, if you have questions, I'm going to stop at the end of segment 1 and at the end of the program each time to see what questions you have. If there are personal questions you don't want to write in Q&A or the chat box, just send me an email, drjack@advisingtheadvisors.com, and I'll be happy to do that. Finally, because I always like to provide Charlie's people with something that they can go away with, if any of you are so inclined to say, boy, I could use some personal coaching, I'll do a complimentary coaching session. Again, just email me, drjack@advisingtheadvisors.com, and we'll have a confidential coaching session about anything you want to talk about. So that's enough of the commercial. So let's talk about actionable steps to develop the mindset of a champion financial advisor. Charlie told you that I've worked with several Olympic gold medal winners and hundreds of elite athletes. And now I teach the same blueprint, proven blueprint for success to financial professionals, legal professionals, medical professionals, you name it. So in my 47-year career as a professional sports psychologist, I've helped hundreds of these people to develop a mindset that will truly differentiate them from their competition. And that's what I want to help you do as well. And a key piece of the process is developing what we call stress hardiness. And most importantly, employing the #1 behavioral trait that has been proven to differentiate good performance from championship or superb performance. So those are the 2 issues I'm going to deal with today and give you some actionable skills. In my 14 years specializing with financial professionals, I believe that all of you are gifted. but you've successfully navigated undergraduate school. Several of you have gone on for MBAs or other advanced degrees. You've taken several series exams. You overcome all kinds of significant challenges in your financial career. But most of you have never lived up to your potential, just like most gifted athletes don't live up to their potential. And why is that? Because they have this layer of lack of confidence or self-doubt, or I don't know what the future holds in store, or you get overwhelmed by competition. So these skills that I'm teaching you now are to help you to overcome those situations. Many of you keep your God-given gifts buried between these layers of lack of confidence and stress. So how does an elite athlete or an elite advisor uncover these gifts and talents that lie within and therefore become a champion of what they do? So this is what we're going to focus on today. My goals for the webinar: number one, I'm going to teach you how to develop the 3 C's for maintaining stress hardiness. They're called the 3 C's because they all start with C, so they're easy to remember. Secondly, I'll teach you how to employ the number 1 behavioral trait that will help change good performance as a financial professional into consistently superb or championship performance. This trait has been examined in psychological studies for more than 45 years in hundreds of occupations besides financial services, and the results are consistently positive, continue to show the same thing. So let's begin by talking about the 3 C's for maintaining stress hardiness. Again, I'll be speaking somewhat rapidly. If you have questions, jot them in the chat box or Q&A, and we'll go over them with Charlie at the end of this segment. It's rare, but some fortunate people seem to genetically be hardwired with the 3 C's. I'm talking about astronauts, some pilots, some military leaders. These are people who tend to have these 3 C's, and they're inborn. But most of us don't have these, but we can learn to adapt them. These behaviors don't come naturally. It's something that you have to focus on. And the good news is that anyone, it's been proven, can learn these habits. So developing these characteristics empowers people to become resilient despite experiencing the inevitable stressors involved in your career and your life. I mean, think about it. Today, the market is doing very nicely, but what happened the last 2 days? How many of you stressed over toxic clients you may have to deal with, people calling you and saying, why didn't you warn me? You know, these are the kinds of stressors that you face all the time. How do we overcome this? Well, the first C of stress hardiness is called commitment. Let's say you decided to become a financial professional because a parent or close relative who took you under his or her wing encouraged you to join a profession where you can make a wonderful living and truly help people. You realize that such a career would offer you vision and purpose in life and would have relevance to your own long-term goals. Both champion athletes and advisors who are committed to short and long-term goals and keep these goals in mind regardless of unfortunate events and the negative thoughts that may creep into their minds tend to be very successful. Now, to develop this kind of commitment, you need to do the following. 1, write your short and long-term goals down. Research has shown that people who actually write their goals down instead of just thinking them are 11 times more likely to achieve them. 2, revisit these goals regularly and modify them if necessary, and make them realistic goals. For example, if you write down, I want to bring in $80 million AUM next year. If that's not realistic, don't put it down as a goal. Put something realistic that you can do for the next year, for example, or 6 months. This is the important part of all of this. Give yourself ways in which you could have in the past sabotaged yourself from accomplishing those goals. We all tend to sabotage ourselves. You know, we want to lose X amount of pounds, but we say we'll do it after the party, or we'll do it after New Year's, or we'll do it after Christmas, or we'll do it after Thanksgiving. So how have you sabotaged yourself in the past so that you won't do that again? Each day, close your eyes and visualize yourself once you've accomplished this goal. When I work with clients, I do a lot of coaching with advisors. I make hypnotic recordings where they visualize success. It's a powerful technique that I've always used with all of my athletes, and I use them with my advisors. Commit yourself to a few years at a time, knowing that you'll revisit this commitment at a time at that time and pour all of your energy into a relatively short commitment. You'll be surprised at how devoted you can become when there's a reasonable recommitment decision built into your career plan. You don't have to be stuck with this commitment for life. Things change, like we couldn't anticipate the pandemic that got in the way of a lot of people's goals. And finally, engage more deeply in working relationships with your colleagues, managers, and mentors, helping you to feel like an integral and important part of your firm. And when I talk about mentors, those of you who aren't familiar with what Charlie provides, stay tuned to the end of this, because he is an unbelievable, giving, kind, and smart mentor for financial advisors. The second C is control. Stress-hardy individuals and advisors are inner-directed, meaning they believe they are in control of their own destiny, as opposed to being like a rudderless sailboat where the winds are blowing and they're at the whim of other forces rather than themselves. Are you at the whim of market volatility? Yes, but you can do things about that in a proactive way. So people who feel in control enjoy the relative autonomy of being able to make or contribute to major decisions related to their work, rather than being micromanaged by others. Take control. Now, most of you have what we call type A personalities. This is all discussed in the book. But some of you, and with type A personalities, sometimes you take too much control, or you get upset if you don't have too much control. So that's another issue. But some of you have people-pleasing personalities, where you kind of do anything so that people will like you. And many times you sabotage yourself and you're afraid to say no to people. So in my book, I talk all about how to assert yourself and take the appropriate amount of control. Stress-hardy advisors look at stressors as motivators and opportunities, challenges, rather than overwhelming mountains in front of them. With elite athletes, if they have an unfortunate outcome, they lose a match, or they're in the middle of a golf game and they have a bad shot, instead of saying, I can't believe I did that, or what if I screw this up for the rest of the game? That would be negative, self-defeating kinds of things to say to themselves. They ask themselves, where's my next opportunity? Always look for the next door that's going to open. Champion advisors, just like elite athletes, continually try to influence outcomes rather than feeling powerless or like a rudderless sailboat, as I mentioned. Such as dealing with the unexpected and unpredictable COVID situation and all of its ramifications. You can conduct proactive webinars for your clients so they don't feel lost and afraid. Don't wait for market volatility. Have regular, proactive, maybe bi-weekly or monthly webinars that you can do for your clients. We now know with Zoom and so forth, you can do webinars. You don't have to have one-on-one meetings with people coming to your office. That takes so much time. And the third C is challenge. Stress-hardy advisors see stress as an inevitable part of their lives, which they can take charge of in terms of conversations they have in their heads about situations they encounter. Rather than getting rattled when their comfort level is disrupted, they tell themselves that they wish this didn't happen, but consider these unfortunate situations as challenges and look for silver linings, for example. I'm going to give you an example of that. But those of you who've heard any of my others know this example, but there may be a lot of new folks today. So I want to give you this example of how you can challenge yourself despite negative things that happen in your life. Instead of getting overwhelmed, use it as a positive. It was a fabulous June day in San Diego, and my wife and I were boarding a flight for Maui in Hawaii. We were so excited because I was lucky enough to be brought in as a keynote speaker for an advisor group, and they were not only paying me, they were giving us 4 days in Maui. Doesn't get much better than that. We're all excited. Everyone on the plane is going to Maui. They're all very happy. The plane takes off. It's a gorgeous day. My wife is sitting on the aisle to the left of me. In the window to the left of me. I'm on the aisle. And shortly after we take off, she gets up and goes to the restroom. She comes back, and then I say, you know what? I better go to the restroom now too. So I go to the restroom and I come back and sit down. Now, as I'm sitting down, the young lady sitting across the aisle from me is feverishly writing a note on one of those little cocktail napkins they give you. In fact, this is the actual note. You probably can't read it, but I'll read it to you. And she keeps looking at me while she's writing the note. And I'm fantasizing, wow, a young lady, half my age, is writing a note to me. Can't she see I'm with someone? But I haven't had a note written to me by a young lady since fourth grade. And their name was Susan Bonelli. That's how rare this happened. I can still remember who sent me the note. I'm wondering, what could this woman possibly want to say to me that she can't say out loud? And so she hands me the note, and I'm all excited. And here's the exact note. Sir, I don't mean to embarrass you, but I think you should know that the toilet seat cover is hanging out of the back of your pants. What? Now, I had a choice, ladies and gentlemen. I could have been A, mortified and looked at my wife to the left for the rest of the 6-hour flight and cranked my neck that way because I didn't want to see this woman. Or I could have found a silver lining here. And I thought for a few moments, and I looked over at her and I said, young lady, don't worry about embarrassing me. You just gave me an opening for every speech I'm going to do from now on, because I talk about how we can take a negative and turn it into a positive. So that's an example of the kinds of things you can do when bad things happen. And athletes, as well as advisors, look at negative outcomes as challenges. You know, I recently completed working with an advisor in a coaching scenario. Let's call him Steve. He was ready to actually quit the advising business and looked at compliance issues and toxic clients, and the pressure to build his book of business as overwhelming obstacles. I never knew it would be like this when I went to school. And, you know, my uncle was a successful advisor. He never warned me about the negative. He just told me about how much money he was making and all of that. So with Steve, I quickly got him into some hypnotic recordings that on Zoom, it's easy to record these things and then you can play them forever, just like I've done for all of my athletes over the years. And the focus was to look at each obstacle he ran into as a challenge, which he could overcome. I had him visualizing overcoming obstacles that we thought of as possibilities. And in a few weeks, Steve's book of business began to grow because his stress evaporated. His wife started contacting me and saying, I don't know what you've been doing with Steve, but he's sleeping much better. In the past, he used to sleep, he almost didn't get to sleep on Sunday nights, worried about going to work on Monday. And every Friday, he couldn't wait to get out of the office. She said, all of this is changing. I didn't know it, but Steve had been on anti-anxiety medication, which his wife said he doesn't even need it anymore. So a huge success case, helping him learn the 3 C's of stress hardiness. So remind yourself about the tremendous value you provide to your clients and their families, and continue your career vision and purpose by staying focused on your goals, truly believing that you have the commitment and control to establish them. So let's pause now for any questions. So I'll throw it over now to Charlie and see if you have any questions.
Jack, nothing has come in at this point, but I'm curious. You had mentioned using the example of Steve and the overcoming challenges. You said within a couple of weeks.
Yeah, sounds miraculous, doesn't it? Sounds miraculous.
Yeah.
The interesting thing in the field of psychology and psychotherapy in the last 50 years is we figured out finally what causes people distress and any negative emotion. It has nothing to do with your childhood, has nothing to do with past events. It has to do with what you were thinking right before you recognized that negative emotion. So, for example, the stock market goes through hoops, and that doesn't cause stress for a financial professional. What causes stress is what the conversation they have in their head about that. If they say to themselves, oh no, client X is about to call me, this happens every time this goes on, and they try to rip me a new one, that's going to cause stress. On the other hand, if you say to yourself, you know, this happens all the time, it will bounce back. I've prepared a proactive webinar on this that I presented to them. If anyone calls me, I'll refresh their memory. I'll give them the recording again. Then the stress level is much reduced. So it's all about the conversations. So with Steve, once I showed him the conversations he was having that was causing the stress, it was like an aha experience. And then I said, well, instead of you just thinking the next time it happens, you'll change the conversation, let's make some hypnotic recordings to help you in that endeavor. And for him, it worked out like a charm. I think we had maybe 3 sessions, 4 at the most, and he was fine. A year later, he checked back in. He said he's doing fine. He had one little glitch that he wanted to tell me about, and then we did it, and he was fine. So, yeah.
Jack, we did get a question from Patrice. Hi, Patrice. Thanks for joining us. Jack, why did you identify, or how did you identify financial advisors as your target market?
Okay, great question, Patrice. And by the way, I always hesitate to say great question, because then other people who think about asking a question are going to say, well, maybe mine isn't so great. That's your internal critic. That's what my book is all about. Please ask any question. They're all wonderful questions. What happened, Patrice, was in 2008, I received a random call from the head of the Australian Financial Advisors Association, who told me he had read several of my stress mastery articles online. They didn't have to do with financial professionals. They were mainly to do with athletes and other people. And he said, do you know what's going on in the world economy? And I said, sort of, but I'm not that familiar with financial services. So he said, well, I really could use your help in developing a video stress mastery series for my advisors, because not only are they jumping through hoops to thinking that they're going to be out of business, but at the same time, the government of Australia has mandated fee for services, no more hidden commissions. And he said that those two events they're panicking. So I started researching financial advisors and said, I had an epiphany. Financial professionals just like athletes. Why can't I teach them the same blueprint? So that's when I started switching what I was doing and wrote the book, The Financial Advisor's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide. So that's how I started working with financial professionals. And I find that when I do keynote speeches and so forth, many people will come up to me and say, I was an athlete. So I know that a lot of people are chosen in financial services because of their athletic background, because the assumption is they're used to competition, they're used to grinding, they're used to working with others as a team and so forth. So a lot of financial institutions go after former athletes. And so it all really blends together with what I do.
We got another one, and Patrice, that was a stressful event. You're absolutely right. So our friend Jesse Jack asked, for a new advisor, what would be the first step to take when prospecting and avoiding rookie mistakes?
Well, that's a whole other workshop, But the biggest thing I would tell you, Jesse, is look at a missed opportunity as just that, not a failure on your part. If you try to make an appointment and they cancel it, or if you do a little workshop or webinar and nobody shows up or whatever, just say, where is my next opportunity? This is a numbers game. This is not personal. Don't look at it as a failure, because that's when you start to beat yourself up. And that's what the second part of what I'm going to talk about is all about. And by the way, we talk about client events that advisors sometimes use to bring in new clients. It's usually a plate-licking dinner in the back of a restaurant, and not many people show up unless they just want the free meal. Maybe the advisor does a speech or something like that. So many years ago, I said to myself, why waste this opportunity and waste the money on an event that's not going to bring you new clients or bring value to your ongoing clients? So why can't I help them develop a real value-added program? So I developed a client event called How to Live Much Longer Than Your Kids Hoped You Would. And this is a tongue-in-cheek title for a serious subject, the psychology of life extension. I teach clients and their guests how to live longer and better. It's my mental wellness workshop, my mental wealth workshop. And it packs the house usually. Now we're doing it, through Zoom, because I'm not ready to go out to places yet. But it packs the house, and everybody seems to be able to invite potential clients as guests, because who wouldn't want to hear a nationally known psychologist teach you how to live longer and better? So it's a win-win for everyone. And frequently, the advisor or advisor group doesn't even have to pay me to do this, because they work with insurance carriers or wholesalers who are happy to underwrite it. So if you want to learn more about that or have any questions, my client event, unique client event to differentiate you from your competition, drjack@advisingtheadvisors.com, and just send me a note, tell me more about the client event. So that was a good segue to get into that. So I'm thankful for that. So let's get into number 2 now. This next segment relates to the number one trait. It's been proven over almost 50 years now of psychological research that began at MetLife with financial professionals, but now has been replicated in hundreds of industries and keep showing the same thing. This trait you can learn to develop. Most of you don't have it yet, but you can learn to develop this and it will catapult your success. I go into financial services places, your offices and so forth, and teach this trait. That's a whole webinar by itself. Easy to learn. It's based on 50 years of research. But before I tell you what it is, let me ask you these questions to contemplate yourself. Question one is related to how you deal with work-related disappointments and successes. Just think about these things and jot down maybe how you would answer this. When disappointing things happen in your job, for example, you lose a client or you have to deal with a toxic client who's complaining about his or her portfolio, what do? Do you, number one, tend to blame yourself and beat yourself up inside your head? Number two, do you tend to worry that you may continue to lose clients because of some difficulty or deficiency that you have and not being able to consistently help your clients with important wealth management decisions? Or do you view this disappointment as an example of maybe several areas in your life where you wish you were better prepared to avoid disappointments? You get yourself angry and irritated quite easily when this happens. Question number two, when good things happen to you on your job, say you conduct a seminar and actually get several new clients, do you tend to feel that you were simply lucky and it could have gone either way? Do you think that your good performance in the seminar was a fluke? I don't know why I was on my game. I'm usually not. Do you feel happy inside but focus on parts of your life that are still disappointing rather than successful? So just contemplate those two questions and we'll bring them up again a little bit later. These questions are very important because these options represent the way that advisors with pessimistic expectations behave. Everything I just told you is how a pessimistic advisor behaves. And unfortunately, most people tend to be pessimistic. That's why I said many of you don't have the traits we're looking for. The key differentiator between good and outstanding performance is whether you have a pessimistic or an optimistic explanation for positive and negative outcomes in your life. You know, one of the biggest roadblocks to success is fear of failure. Fear of failure is actually worse than failure itself because it condemns you to a life of unrealized potential. Think about what I said. If you're overcome with fear of what could happen, that's worse than the failure because you're sitting there bracing yourself and can't realize your potential. A ton of studies show that failure is a mere stepping stone to success. Thomas Edison is a great example. It took him 1,000 tries to develop a light bulb that actually worked. He never gave up. He wouldn't be frightened away by failure. And Winston Churchill said it best. He said, success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. So how do you do this? The answer is developing the most important behavioral trait you can learn that will help you to change good performance as a financial professional into consistently superb or championship performance. Again, this research is based on salespeople, physicians, lawyers, athletes, leaders, advisors, you name it. Unwavering results. Having an optimistic reaction or explanation of disappointing events that take place in your career versus a pessimistic explanation, which leads to the outcome, because whatever that explanation in your head is going to lead to your behavioral outcome. And definitions of optimistic explanatory style, this is not simply the glass is half full or half empty like we think about with optimists and pessimists. It's all about what you say to yourself. What are those habits that you say to yourself? That's the key. And that's the source of the other seminars that I've done for Charlie, and maybe we'll repeat them at some time so you can learn that. Optimism and pessimism are really about how you react or explain to yourself the reasons for disappointing or successful events that take place in your career or your life, and your expectations about whether those kinds of events will continue to happen in the future. It all started, by the way, with, I said MetLife, but before MetLife, the research was done with athletes, which is what drew me to this research in the beginning. It was done with NBA players. The psychologists who studied this looked at every single NBA game over a 2-year period. and he had a team of psychologists interviewing the losing team of every single game that the NBA played for 2 years. And they wanted to find out what happened with people who have pessimistic interpretations of their loss as to what happens with people who have optimistic explanations of their loss. So a pessimistic explanation of the loss might be something like this. Yeah, we're not that good this year. We need to rebuild. I don't really expect it'll get much better. Maybe we'll be better next year. An optimistic explanation of the loss is, this is a fluke. We play in this arena only twice a year. The fans are on top of you. It's nerve-wracking, but we only play here twice a year. We can bounce back. That's the difference between optimistic and pessimistic explanations of unfortunate events. And what did they find when they examined 2 full years of games? They found that the optimistic explainers go on a string of wins, whereas the pessimistic explainers continue to lose. Regardless of what the coach does, regardless of the players that come back, they just continue to lose. So optimistic reactors explain disappointing events as caused mostly by isolated external factors beyond their control. If the market jumps through hoops because of something going on in China, like they said this week, that is beyond your control. If you focus on this as it's not my fault, it's beyond my control, this is a temporary setback, it's unlikely to continue, and this event or situation does not define who I am as a financial professional, it doesn't mark me as a failure as a financial professional, then you will continue to be successful. That's the optimistic way of explaining negative events. Think about an optimistic golfer or tennis player who has a disappointing round of golf or a tennis match. They could blame the wind or how wet the course was or how they didn't get much sleep the night before or their mind was elsewhere. They see this as a fluke and temporary and not symbolic of their potential. Now, critics might say that such thinking avoids taking responsibility by finding excuses and blaming other things when you fail. The short answer to that critique is that regardless of whether optimistic reactors are taking responsibility for the outcomes or not, they do much better on many criteria that pessimistic reactors or realists do. They do much better. It doesn't matter. So what if they don't take responsibility if the outcome is wonderful? Some examples of consistent research for optimistic athletes, for example, they go on winning streaks after losses, as I told you. Optimistic explainers have stronger immune systems. In fact, the immune system scenario is part of my How to Live Much Longer Than Your Kids Hoped You Would webinar. But there's all kinds of research on optimistic explainers have stronger immune systems and are healthier, and they overcome serious diseases like cancer and so forth. Tons of research showing that optimistic cancer victims live much longer than pessimistic victims who get the exact same diagnosis. Now let's talk about how pessimistic explainers explain disappointing events. They do it as they say it's their own inadequacies or screw-ups. I didn't get any clients from that webinar or seminar because I didn't prepare, I didn't sleep enough, I didn't know how to answer certain questions. And this is like many parts of my life, it's just going to continue to happen, and I tend to be a screw-up if I really face the facts. This kind of explanation leads to feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. So you can see how pessimists continue to struggle both in their careers and their health. And recall from my first webinar, for those of you who are there, if you're filled with negative, toxic self-talk, and pessimists tend to do that, it turns on the fight or flight emergency system, shuts down the immune system, and it makes you more susceptible to disease. Pessimistic golfer or tennis player who has a disappointing round of golf or match beat themselves up, believe they're screwed up, and believe these disappointments will continue to occur because they're not good enough. And those people tend to fail, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I knew it, but they're failing because they're turning on their fight or flight nervous system and tightening up when it comes time to play the next shot. Now, interestingly, some people say to me, well, I'm already in my 50s. Isn't it too late? Aren't I set in my ways? There are studies that show that developing an optimistic explanatory style by age 45 is the primary determinant of a person's health over the next 20 years. So you can be 45, 50 years old and make the switch then. That will be the primary determinant over your health for the next 20 years. So whether you're an optimistic or pessimistic reactor or explainer of events leads to this self-fulfilling prophecy, which will impact future situations. And it's very crucial to have that kind of optimistic explanatory situation. By the way, when optimists fail, they say it's a fluke. When pessimists succeed, they say it's a fluke. So you can see the opposite way of thinking. Pessimists succeed, I was lucky, I was in the right place at the right time. Optimists succeed, they say it's because of my work ethic, I prepared for this, and I continued to do well, and I will continue to do well. So an optimistic financial advisor might say, I gained this client because of my work ethic, my great education, my experience in the financial industry, my mentoring. I can't be perfect, but I expect to have continued success. When good things happen, pessimistic reactors say, I was just in the right place at the right time. Someone told me about this client. The client was ready to take on a new advisor. That would have normally never happened. Pessimists believe it doesn't matter what they do, they'll only do well if they're lucky in the future. So again, my initial questions, ladies and gentlemen, ask yourself, when disappointing things happen on your job, for example, you lose a client, do you tend to blame yourself and beat yourself up inside your head? Do you worry that you may continue to lose clients because of some difficulty or deficiency you have in your career field? Do you view this disappointment as an example of several areas in your life where you wish you were better prepared to avoid disappointing results? And when good things happen, you gain a new client, for example, do you tend to feel you were lucky, it could have gone either way? Do you wonder whether you can continue to win these kind of the situations that thinking this was just a fluke? Do you feel happy, but inside you focus on parts of your life that are disappointing rather than on your successes? So the key takeaways from this are as follows. When you're faced with inevitable and unfortunate or disappointing situations that happen to all of us, like the pandemic, which you couldn't predict, tell yourself something like this. This is disappointing. I wish it didn't happen, and it's a fluke. I didn't have control over the circumstances surrounding it, and it's unlikely to be repeated in the future. What can I learn from this situation that I can use to my advantage? Just like I learned from that embarrassing situation with the toilet seat cover hanging out of the back of my pants. What did I learn that I can use to my advantage and succeed in my next opportunity? I have all the skills and talents to continue to accomplish my goals, grow my strengths, and skyrocket my success. When you have successes and accomplishments in your career, tell yourself this: I'm so proud of myself because of my tremendous talent and work ethic. I succeeded, and I will continue to use this formula for success and continue to succeed and fulfill my goals. I'm a winner, and I'll teach my children and my subordinates the same blueprint for success. So just like practicing a skill set if you're an athlete, in your advising profession, with repetition and consistency of these mindset skills over time, you build stress hardiness, just like I talked to you in the beginning. You maintain optimistic explanatory explanations for events and situations. And then your subconscious mind will make the shift so you can cast off the toxic habits. And as I said, I make hypnotic recordings to speed up that process. Remember, all of you are gifted champions. Once you change the thinking that's undermined your confidence and you have increased increased confidence that you can overcome your stress, the true champion will emerge consistently. I'm going to take a drink of water and open it up to other questions, Charlie.
Great. We've got one here, Jack, but I can't help but observe mindset drives so much of it, right? And you talk about a lot of, you relate it back to athletics, and, so easy to get into a slump and start thinking negatively about that. And how hard is it to break out of that slump when you've got the wrong mindset? And of course, that applies professionally to athletes as it does to financial advisors and other service providers. We do have another question from Michael. Michael, thank you for this question. It's a good one. Jack, what level of stress is healthy? How do you strike the balance between keeping focus and without getting overwhelmed?
That is a key question.
Sure.
the person who invented stress, Hans Seeley, S-E-Y-L-E, actually had a term called eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S, which he said was positive stress, that we need a certain amount of that to function efficiently. For example, if I'm getting ready to do a keynote address in person, and there's a lot of important people in the audience, and I'm feeling somewhat tense backstage before they introduce me, I have a choice. Choice number one is I can say, oh my God, what if I screw this up? This will screw up my career, and they're counting on me to be great. If I do that, I'm in trouble because my body will tighten itself up thinking there's an emergency. Or I can say, Jack, this feeling of butterflies you have right now is your anticipation and excitement because you can't wait to share this information with these people. That's positive stress. So how you interpret things in a positive way to strike the balance. And one of the ways I think it was Michael, you said, one of the ways when the balance is not right is if you start feeling tense too much. If you're feeling tense too much, you need to back off a little bit. And in chapter 2 of my book, by the way, I give you a quiz, a questionnaire where you talk about certain things in your life. That will show you if your stress level is too much or not and where you need to strike the balance. So again, if you want the book, which goes way beyond everything I've talked about today, I also have a course, an online course for advisors that you get 12 continuing education credits for. If you want information on that, developing the mindset of a champion financial professional, just email me. The book, email me, $15, be the best $15 you ever spent. And if you have personal questions you didn't want to ask today, email me. I'll address all of those questions. No obligation. If you want a coaching session, what have you. Any other questions? I want to leave some time for you, Charlie, too.
Yeah, I'll take about 5 minutes, Jack. So we got plenty of time here. So Scott asks, what do you suggest for people who are both RIAs and life insurance advisors with 32 years experience? He was a four-year college scholarship Division I athlete in football. So what do you suggest for people who are both RIAs and life insurance advisors, 32 years experience?
Okay, well, you've got 32 years of experience, but you've got experience as an elite athlete. What worked for you as an athlete is the exact same dynamics. What did you do as an athlete? If you knew what position he played, or I could tell him a little more, but whatever for example, I had an offensive lineman from the Chicago Bears call me once. And usually when athletes call me, they're in trouble. Something bad's happened or they've been injured or what have you. But in this case, he said he's doing fine, but he's been in the league for 10 years and he wants to prevent something from happening. He's hoping he can do mind over body. His body's going to deteriorate. What could I teach him to help his mind do better? And so that was amazing that he really wanted to do it in a proactive way. And so what I did was I focused on what he did each week that helped him. And then we planned what he was going to do against the opponent for the next week. And I actually, after he viewed the tapes of his next week's opponent, I made hypnotic recordings for him, and he became an all-pro that year. So he did great. And so it's the same thing. What worked for you as a football player? Forget what didn't work for you. We want to avoid those things. But what worked for you? When did you have your best football game, even if it was Little League? I want you visualizing those same skills and thoughts that went into that, because you can do the same thing in your RIA or insurance business. More specific information, sign up for a free coaching session with me. We'll talk about it.
I'll tell you what, I know that one of Scott's strengths was speed. Jack, he was a wide receiver. He ran a 4.3 40.
Okay. All right. So if you're a wide receiver, first thing that you're thinking of, one of the things you're thinking about is what's the route. The next thing you're thinking about is what is the defensive back or safety going to do that I have to be careful of? And you may also be thinking, is someone going to slow me up at the line? How did you interpret those potential negative situations? Did you say to yourself, what if this happens? That would be a mistake. Did you say to yourself, I can do this? I don't have to be perfect each time, but I can do this. Apply the same things to your insurance or RIA business. I don't have to be perfect. I can move from one opportunity to the next. I can do this.
Wonderful. And I just shared Dr. Jack's email address again. Let me see. I'll put that in the chat one more time, as it's kind of getting buried there, Jack. Advising. Make sure I spell it right. There we go. Cool. All right. Let's see. Any other questions? First off, Jack, you and I would never catch Scott. 4,340. Wow. Maybe 32 years later, maybe he's not that fast anymore,
Right.
huh?
We'll see.
Yeah. So Jack, why don't you hand me over control real quick? Here's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to keep it.
Do that.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it really brief. We are, and this is a little, we're going to shift a little bit here. As professionals who are all growing businesses, content marketing is so important for what we do. And I've looked through the names of our attendees. So a lot of you on the list are already taking advantage of this software. We work in conjunction with, at Social Advisor, we work with 5 other agencies globally to develop some of the software that we work on. And so we've got this cool little thing called Post Party. Jack, you've been in a handful of post parties, huh?
Yeah, I really have, and I've enjoyed all of them.
Yeah, I find it addictive because I like to see the impression count on my content go up. And so what we do with Post Party is we help get your content in front of more people. So I'm going to talk real quick about the opportunity, the opportunity with, bear with me a second here while I mess with my tech a little bit. All right. So just going to share a quick PowerPoint with you. So I want to talk very briefly about the opportunity of content marketing on LinkedIn. And we built this piece of software to put some fuel on content marketing on LinkedIn. So as you're growing an audience and a network, and we all do this through webinars and through LinkedIn and through in-person networking events and a lot of other ways, your content marketing opportunity on LinkedIn is really second to none. So here's some of the research that we did. And this kind of blew my mind. It's nice to have these agency partners globally because we can all work together to compile some stats. That top bar there is actually LinkedIn stats, 9 billion content impressions every single week across the LinkedIn network. That's about 3 billion views in Canada and the United States. 2% of the network on LinkedIn is sharing content. So if you're an advisor that is leveraging LinkedIn for growth and influence, content marketing on LinkedIn is a really important step for you. Now, there's right ways to do content and there's wrong ways to do content. My number one tip for content is to create and share native content. What does that mean? Here's a great example. If you look at the post on the left, which you can see was a link to CNN.com, you can see I'd screenshotted this 1 week after that post went out. There is no interaction on it whatsoever. This is resemblant of a lot of the content that third-party vendors make available, that firms make available. It's easy for them to give you a bunch of third-party links. The problem with that is it drives traffic away from LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or wherever else you share content. The social platforms want to retain those eyeballs because, of course, they all make a lot of money with ad revenue. So they want to keep eyeballs on their platform. It helps them maximize that ad revenue. So if you look at the post next to it, that's a native post. That's a post that's created and designed to be consumed right on LinkedIn. Now, of course, this is great celebratory content, right? The achievement of the CFP. But if you look at, this was 6 days after this post originally went out, 738 interactions, 148 comments. So native content, I'm not going to guarantee you're going to get that kind of interaction, but the number one tip I can give you for getting more interaction and more visibility on your content is to post native content. Now, compliance has to review that for most people, right? So make sure that you're thinking ahead of time and get your native content planned maybe a week or two ahead before you want to post it. But that's the number one tip I can give you on getting more exposure for your content. Make sure that content keeps eyeballs right on the platform. Now, here's the other thing you need to think about. What we found out with the research that we do with these global partners, the first 2 hours after you post are the most important for creating a viral effect for your content. So you got to know the algorithm a little bit. You want to get as much interaction on your content within the first 2 hours after you post. And what we found out, it was like 15 likes, 15 comments, right in that ballpark, gets you some of that momentum early after you post. So we created this piece of software. Here's a couple of examples. You can see this is from my friend Lori talking about CRMs on the right there, 10,000 views on that post. It's not a fancy post. It's just run through this piece of software called Post Party. And so what Post Party does is we run 8 post parties a week. There's 3 on Monday, 3 on Wednesday, 2 on Friday. You can take as part in as many or as few of those post parties as you want to, but you're working in groups of 15 people. So when you make a post on LinkedIn and you submit that into the post party, there's 15 people participating with you to interact with each other's content. And that just helps put your content in front of a much, much larger audience. And we found that it typically exceeds a 5x on exposure for your content. Jack, I've seen content do 25x, which is the case of that CRM post. So that's pretty good. So here's what we're doing. I'd love for you to try it out, kick the tires on it, see if it's right for you. There's no long-term commitment to it. It's $99 a month, but I'm going to give you 30 days free just to try it out. So if you go to socialpostparty.com, and the promo code there is 30 days free. Jump in, try it out, run a couple post parties. Like I said, when you see the kind of exposure that you get, the warning is it gets a little bit addictive. You want to go back and do the next post party. So, and if you've got any questions about that, here's my contact information. We do have one more chat that came in, Jack. Let me stop the screen share here. Let's see. Where's that chat? And Scott, he's taking courses from Tony Robbins and Bruce Wright. Awesome. And Scott's going to be reaching out to you because he's got more questions about what a Division I college athlete can translate into his RIA practice. So
perfect.
Yep. And wonderful. So we had a great turnout. We'll send everybody a recording of this. And Jack, sincerely from the bottom of my heart, I learned something every time. And, I kind of like that we do these once every maybe 2 or 3 months because it's a good refresher for me too.
Absolutely. And we'll continue to do it. And by the way, I forgot to mention, if any of your listeners are interested in that course, I'll give them a 20% discount.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful. So I imagine they can email you for that. And
they can email me for all of the above. I'll take care of it.
You're a wealth of knowledge. I've got more confidence already just from the last 54 minutes of my life. So thank you for that, Jack. And a huge thank you to everybody who took time out of your day to join us today. That's the most precious thing you have. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right. Take care, Jack.